Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Michael Noland here. This is The Bottom Line, and tonight we're going to discuss Rolling Stone's latest list, their top 200 greatest singers of all time. People who were on this list even 10 years ago have even, at times, disappeared, while we were supplied with this list with a ton of more PC-oriented singers. Now, I know I'm a little bit late in getting this list out, folks, but the reason is I live in California, and well, California is currently underwater. So I've spent the last few days kind of battening down the hatches and getting the homestead ready for the storm. But you know, one of our fellow tribalites beat me to the punch on this one. I freely admit that. Glenn Kellaway, a great channel, by the way, folks. You need to check him out. This man's very, very knowledgeable, especially when it comes to classic rock. And he gave his response, and at the beginning of his video, he said that he fully intended to give a rant, but calmer heads prevailed, and Glenn gave us a more even-handed response to this ridiculous list. But you know, calmer heads be damned. I'm going to rant. I mean, this list is so obviously Hollywood-oriented almost. Now, over the years, Rolling Stone's lists have always been a bit controversial. But you know, Rolling Stone, like Disney, has decided that they know exactly what you should know and appreciate. Bullshit. I mean, these cretins, these nimrods must truly think we were born yesterday. Now, I do want to let you guys know what my criterias are for my list, okay? I'm going to be totally upfront with that. First of all, you're going to find a lot of rock singers on my list. That's my favorite art genre. That's what got me interested in music. It was not only important to me as a musician, but as a fan. I love rock and roll. But I also appreciate great pop, blues, a bit of jazz, even some country western when it's done right. My second criteria is that it's what these singers did with their voice. My third criteria for my list will be what those singers did with their voice that carved new territory and created even a forward movement in whatever genre that singer was singing in. And my fourth criteria or rule for this particular list, there shall be no Axl Rose on this list or any other great singers list. First of all, as I go through my top 20 choices, I'll give you Rolling Stone's choice for that position. And at number 20, Rolling Stone chose Marvin Gaye. All right, so that's a solid choice. I agree, he should be in the top 20, but not this low. Number 20 for me would be Bryan Ferry of Roxy Music. Now, the reason I chose Bryan Ferry is for a couple of reasons. First of all, I love his silky voice. And second of all, it's how he worked that silky voice that in any other genre would have pegged him as a crooner and put it into rock and roll, supplying just enough edge to his voice. Do you see what I'm talking about, folks? He worked with his voice. He carved out with his voice practically a brand new subgenre in my favorite art form, rock and roll music. Not only that, but Bryan and company supplied me one of the greatest listening experiences. And of course, I'm talking about their magnificent album, Avalon. All right, so that gets us to number 19, and Rolling Stone's number 19 was Frank Sinatra. Again, a wonderful choice, but far too low on this list, and I'll talk about that as we go along. Number 19 for me would be the wonderful voice of Kate Bush. Now, for a lot of our younger viewers, they are just now discovering how wonderful Kate Bush was as an artist, but it's how she played with her voice and so many different changes as she would change her style from album to album. And also, by the way, a lot of the musicians who were in her band were also connected to the Alan Parsons Project, one of my favorite rock acts, no doubt. All right, so at number 18, Rolling Stone chose Celia Cruz. Never heard of her. Evidently, she's big in salsa. Now, salsa is a fine art form in itself. I'm not a big fan of it, and frankly, I've never heard of the woman. But at number 18, I would put Roy Orbison. Now, I choose Roy Orbison even over Elvis, so Elvis will not be on this list because Elvis had a voice and looks. Roy Orbison, not quite as good looking, had Elvis's voice, only better, in my opinion. This man's range, the way he held a note and everything, as far as I'm concerned, Elvis could only hope that he sounded as good as Roy Orbison. All right, so at number 17, they chose Elvis Presley, of course. But my choice for number 17 is a singer that I don't even like as a person, but what a wonderful voice this guy has, and I'm talking about Don Henley of the Eagles. Now, talk about blue-eyed soul. You could swear you're listening to a black singer sometimes with this guy, and yet in the next song, he sounds like some hick from Hicksville singing a country song. This guy has all the chops, and as a songwriter on top of that, I think that he wrote songs that he could really experiment with his voice, and good Lord, you can't have a top 20 without Don Henley from the Eagles in it. Again, don't like the guy, but I don't have to like the guy to love his voice. All right, that gets us to number 16. Rolling Stone, again, chooses a good solid contender here, Prince. Now, Prince would be in my top 50. No doubt. And even between him and Michael Jackson, I think he did more stretching of his voice than even Michael. But both of them would be in my top 50 easily. But here's where I go out of character a bit, folks. I chose as number 16 a singer who sings a type of singing that I generally just can't stand. You know, those singers who sing acrobatically on all of the America's Got a Toilet shows. Vocal acrobatics galore. I generally hate that type of singing, but I've got to place Whitney Houston on this list. Now, she's not only the only artist in this whole genre that I ever bought an album by, but I bought her very first album and loved her right away. And you know, as far as vocal acrobatics, she nailed it, and everybody's been mimicking her ever since. My very favorite album and listening experience from Whitney was her very first album. That album, by the way, was one of 2 CDs. The very first CDs I ever bought, I had just got my first CD player, and I bought this one and Paul McCartney's Tug of War. Now, the reason I bought Paul McCartney's Tug of War is I had heard it had been recorded and mixed digitally, and I wanted to see how it sounded on CD. For Whitney, I just loved her voice and the material on that album. All right, so the number 15 spot for Rolling Stone is exactly what I was talking about at the intro of this video. These people don't even know what they're talking about as far as I'm concerned. They've chosen a truly great artist at number 15, a groundbreaking artist, and one of rock's greatest presences, but a great vocalist, Bob Dylan. Now, I love Bob Dylan's voice, just like I love Neil Young's voice, but neither one of them would even be on my top 100 singers of all time. Now, you have to give credit to Bob. He had a limited range, he has a limited voice, and the way he talks comes out in his singing, no doubt, and I love Bob Dylan. But a great singer? No, he falls a bit shy of being what I would consider a great vocalist. But my choice from number 15 isn't too far from a Dylan sound. Bob Seger. This is Dylan if he could sing. Now, Bob Seger's even a great songwriter on top of all of that, and like Don Henley, I think he used his material to experiment with his voice, because when that man takes off, you can feel the pain or the longing. That's Bob Seger at his best, and damn it, what a fantastic vocalist. All right, that leads us to number 14 by Rolling Stone, and they have included Freddie Mercury. A wonderful singer, no doubt, but once again, Rolling Stone placing him this low on this list is a crime. No, my choice for number 14, and I even feel guilty placing him this low, is the wonderful Marvin Gaye. Now, they did nail something about Marvin Gaye in Rolling Stone, and that was his wonderful headspace tenor, that real high, natural voice. Now, I've mentioned before, I was born in North Carolina, but basically raised in California. But at 17, I went back to North Carolina to live with my grandmother. That was a 3.5-day Greyhound bus ride. And I met this young man. I was 17. He had to be 19 or 20, and he was listening to Marvin Gaye. Pretty soon, we were on that bus spending hours. I had my acoustic guitar, and he would sing like Marvin Gaye. This guy, I don't even remember his name. We spent 3 days together, never saw each other again. He got off at Atlanta, Georgia. But you know, the whole connection and that bus trip made me a Marvin Gaye fan for life. All right, at number 13, Rolling Stone chose the wonderful Patsy Cline, one of the world's greatest singers, no doubt. She would be in my top 50, and if it was my mom's list, she'd be at number 1. But once again, I've always thought that Patsy Cline's voice was more or less God-given, and she sang well within her comfort zone. She sang extremely well in that comfort zone, but I didn't hear her stretching. Of course, she died at 30 in a plane crash, and who knows where she would have gone with it if she had been allowed a bit more time. Instead, my number 13 is the magnificent Tina Turner. Now, yeah, she was born with her raspy voice. You can hear it even when she talks in interviews. So it's not like she had this normal voice and she developed that, but it's what she did with that raspy voice. I mean, how she climbed to high registers, how she would attack those highest of notes from the top. I mean, this woman could sing, and she had a great pair of legs. And talk about working with your voice. You guys know I'm a fan of Robert Plant and how he's worked on his voice as he's gotten older. Robert Plant thinks he's even a better singer today than he ever was with Led Zeppelin, despite the lack of range that he has. But Tina Turner was one of the first artists who learned to sing even more sultry and deal with her voice as it aged. And on top of that, several careers, Tina Turner has to be on this list. And to tell you the truth, I feel a little bit guilty placing her this low. All right, next up, number 12, in holy shades of crimes against humanity, these fools have chosen Jann Wenner at number 12. WTF, you morons. How the hell did these idiots place this man this low? Now, I've probably given a little bit away here, and we're going to talk about John further on, but this is a crime, folks. This is a crime for sure. At number 12 for me would be the wonderful and magnificent Paul Rodgers, the lead singer to Bad Company, as well as Free. Who do you think Queen first got to replace Freddie Mercury? Now, I don't think Paul Rodgers is as great a singer as Freddie Mercury, but as far as soul, blues, and rock and roll, in your face, he's even better than Freddie Mercury. This guy has it all. He has range, he has grit, and the guy has presence when he sings. You know, his voice is so powerful, it cuts through any possible mix. You could do a smiley face EQ on this guy's voice and he'd cut right to your heart. All right, so at number 11, Rolling Stone has chosen Little Richard. Again, a great choice for any top 20 list, but once again, they hit the mark far too low. But then there's going to be those of you out there who think that my choice at number 11 is far too low, and that is the wonderful Aretha Franklin. I mean, talk about vocals that cut through any mix. Talk about vocals that practically don't need a microphone. All right, at number 10, Rolling Stone chose Al Green. Al Green's a great singer. He'd be in my top 100. I don't know if he'd make my top 50, but in my opinion, placed way too high on this list. Now, my number 10 choice would be Janis Joplin. For those of you who think I've placed her too low, the reason is, and this gets back to one of my reasonings on choosing these people, is for the most part, I wasn't a big fan of Big Brother and the Holding Company. But that does not mean that she wasn't a major talent, and she's gotta be on everybody's top 10 list, right? All right, at number 9, Otis Redding on the Rolling Stones list there, again, placed far too high. He's a fine singer, a great artist, but in the top 10 vocalists of all times, I don't think so. Instead, I choose, despite what my wife would like to not see on this list, the wonderful, the powerful, one of the greatest singers, either black or white, in rock or blues, Rod Stewart. Now, I'm not talking about his 80s output, his big hits during that time. Now, his vocals were just as good then, I just didn't care for the material. But when he was with the Jeff Beck group, my God, you know, him and Bob Tinch sounded so authentically blues. They only made Jeff Beck look even better than he already was. All right, so at number 8, Rolling Stone chose Beyonce. No, I'm serious. They chose Beyonce. No, really. I mean, talk about gag me with a spoon, get her off every list in the universe. The woman can't even decide what lyrics belong on what album without having to go back and record them. Bad choice. Bad Rolling Stone. Bad Rolling Stone. Play dead. I'll give you a singer for number 8. How about the wonderful Billie Holiday? This woman was not only a fantastic singer, but she would sing the blues like a torch singer. And she was responsible early on in the development of the blues for the 20th century. A tragic story, no doubt, but you can listen to just about anything this wonderful sultress of the blues sings, and you'll be impressed. All right, for number 7, they chose Stevie Wonder. Now, first of all, I am a major Stevie Wonder fan. I've collected his stuff ever since Inner Visions, and he's one of rock and pop's greatest songwriters. I consider him nearly at the level of Lennon and McCartney, and there's no doubt he's a fabulous singer. He'd be in my top 50, but as far as his voice, he sings, again, he's one of those singers who sings like he talks. He's one of those songwriters who writes songs for his voice rather than writing songs to explore his voice. Once again, one of the giants in the music industry, and a bit rock and roll on top of that. But placed in the top 10, that's way too high in my opinion. No, at number 7, I would choose the best crooner to ever live, Frank Sinatra. Now, I've said this before, but for those of you who haven't heard me describe what I think about Sinatra, is his ability on how he would dive on his notes. And I've given this example. I did it my way. He did that so well. I mean, that was not only his trademark, but that was a different way, a different approach to singing, especially for crooners. On top of that, he's one of my favorite artists in general. I'm not a major crooners fan, but for Sinatra, I am, and I love the fact that this man was actually one of the first people in history to create an album as an album itself instead of a collection of tunes he recorded over the last 6 weeks, and we'll call it an album. But for Frank Sinatra, it was always about technique, and he was the grand master in that genre as far as I'm concerned. All right, so at number 6, they chose Ray Charles. Again, a wonderful singer, definitely in my top 100, but this high, no, I disagree. Now, my number 7 choice, I even feel guilty for putting him this low, but maybe you'll understand as we get a little higher on the list, and that is the wonderful Little Richard. I mean, talk about the man who taught Paul McCartney how to sing. Well, that's what he claimed, and Paul McCartney once in an interview looked right at the camera and said, "Yes, Richard, you did teach me." Now, we're going to be talking about Paul McCartney here, but Paul McCartney is one of the greatest vocalists to ever live, and for him to even think about emulating Little Richard ought to tell you how fantastic Little Richard is, just on empirical evidence alone. I mean, he is the original rock yelper. He is the original high-end singer in rock and roll. And for him to be any lower than this is another crime. Oh, and speaking of crime, at number 5, Rolling Stone chose Mariah Carey. Can you believe that? Oh, this woman has such an annoying voice, and personally, she's ruined Christmas for me. Now, a lot of her fans would say her vocals are crystal clear like a bell. Well, at number 5, I'll show you crystal clear like a bell, and that is John Anderson, lead singer of Yes. I mean, talk about writing songs around your voice and then turning around and writing a song that encourages your voice to go different. This man was always experimenting with his voice. Very high-end singer and hard to sing along with, but what a listening pleasure. This man could teach a master class on singing. All right, so at number 4, they choose Billie Holiday, and as you know, I've chosen Billie Holiday, just not this high. But I'm certainly not going to fault them for placing her higher than I would. But instead, at number 4 for me, is Freddie Mercury from Queen. I mean, I've said it before, this man can sing anything from rock to opera. And you know what? The reason he said he could sing so well was because of extra teeth in his mouth that he never got rid of. And he felt that it created more room in the mouth. I don't know if that's true. That was his theory. Alls I know is this man could sing the most crystal clear pop song and then turn around and sing almost heavy metal. This is not only one of rock's premier vocalists, but one of the greatest vocalists of any genre. All right, so at number 3, they chose Sam Cooke. He'd be in my top 100, but nowhere near this level. But instead, I'm choosing at number 3, the wonderful vocal talents of John Lennon. You know, when I listen to the Beatle albums from their very first Please Please Me album all the way up to and including Help, it's John Lennon's voice that really carries the Beatles. Later on, of course, it would be Paul, and if there was any reason that I liked John secondarily in their second half, is because of his own insecurities. The man didn't think he sounded right. He was always changing his voice, and doing so gave us some magnificent pieces of art, but it was a lot of artificial effects at that point because he didn't care for his voice. You know, if John had stayed singing like he did from their first album through Help, he'd be one step higher on this list. All right, at number 2, RS chose Whitney Houston. Again, not a bad choice. I think placed too high. No, the number 2 vocalist for me, the person that usurped just slightly Jann Wenner is the wonderful vocals of Paul McCartney, his partner in crime. Now, the reason I choose Paul slightly over John is because, first of all, the man could do it all. Paul could sing crystal clear on a pop song. Yesterday comes to mind as an example of that, and then turn around and squelch his way almost to Led Zeppelin levels with the wonderful Helter Skelter. The man could do it all. You've got to give him credit. If you like Jann Wenner slightly better as an artist, I understand. But to say that Jann Wenner was a better singer than Paul, I think slightly stretches it for me. All right, their number one choice, Aretha Franklin. And Aretha Franklin would be number one on a whole lot of lists, I'm sure, except that these idiots keep missing the boat. They keep forgetting their roots. They keep forgetting that they used to be, more or less, a rock magazine with a political agenda. And I can't out-argue Aretha Franklin as being a wonderful vocalist, but not on the number one spot of the greatest vocalists of all time. No, that goes to the magnificent, the wonderful, the true king of vocalists in any genre whatsoever, Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin. This man destroyed his vocals for you and me. This man live sounded more interesting than he did on record, and he sounded great on record. This man was not only a great singer, but just listen to him play with his voice while Jimmy does his soloing. No other pair in rock and roll ever did this, and no other singer could take my attention away from Jimmy Page, my favorite guitar player of all time, bar none, end of story. All right, so that's my list. That's the way I see it, but I know a lot of you aren't going to agree with my list. You might agree with a few, but you might even think that I place some of your favorite singers too low on the list. But you see, that's what this whole channel is about. It is a two-way discussion, and that two-way discussion happens by, first of all, me providing you with a video, and then you responding in the comments. If you enjoyed tonight's video, please give it a thumbs up. No fooling, folks. That helps the channel to grow. That helps these videos find a better spot and more viewership on YouTube. And with your help, we can get past the grumpy-ass YouTube algo dragon and make it work for us for a change. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel as of yet, what are you waiting for? You know, it's not rocket science. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, then hit that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all of my future videos, not only on classic rock, but today's music scene as well. All right, so if I've still got my head above water, I'll be uploading my next video shortly. Until I do, why not watch one of these? I'm Michael Nolan. This, of course, is The Bottom Line. And folks, you and I, we are the tribe. I'll see you in my next video.